Well, hello and welcome along to our Analytics Half an Hour. This afternoon, I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm going to run through some of the example business problems that customers present to me and the way that they can be solved using Google Analytics. Now, just before we get started, just to introduce me, I'm Vernon Riley. I'm a chartered mechanical engineer. So I've spent my career working with systems and processes. So I apply engineering insights to enable the measurement and reporting systems that go alongside analytics to fit business objectives. Just a word about your interface. If you're listening to this live, it's fairly simple. To the right of the main window, there's a sidebar. One of the tabs is a chat window. And in that chat window, you can post messages to me. Now, I'll do my best to keep up with any messages, but obviously, as you'll understand, I can't necessarily read and type in response to all of the messages whilst I'm concentrating on talking to everyone else. So if you've heard all of this, please type "hearing you fine" in the chat box on the right-hand side. And with that, let's get going. Okay, well, one of the main problems that people come to me with is a situation where they've got a website and there are a number of different types of users. And I've picked one example to go through. A guy came to me, he's got a website and there are three types of users. There were general users, people coming off the internet, and we don't yet have enough information to classify them. So we can't decide whether they're simply researching, looking to become a customer, or perhaps they're an existing customer or something else. And the pattern of behavior, the usage on the website could potentially vary significantly within this single group. But in general, where we sit at the moment is we don't know enough about any particular group in order to be able to use the behavior to segregate the users, right? But quite apart from the general group, there's a more defined group of users who's registered to make use of the platform, to make use of the service. These people will have completed a registration process. And in that lies the clue. What we need from an analytics point of view is to record the fact that they've completed that registration process and make it persist. So remember that through their future interactions that they are a registered user. All right. Now, in principle, at least, this isn't that hard, but snags will arise as they change devices or if they clear cookies or change their status, right? If they stop being a registered user or something like that. Now, for those who are selling or operating an e-commerce process online, the completion of the registration process might well be the end of a purchase process. So it's when the credit card details have been collected and the users have been paid. The user has paid, and we want to record them as a customer. So then we want to categorize them as customer, as registered, as different from the general user. Now, in some cases, like the client I've been dealing with, there's yet a third category. The customer has their own customers, right? And the person I was working for provided a portal, right? So there are prospects and customers of the registered user on that portal. And that would be yet another category of visitor who's potentially going to be seen on the website and seen in the analytics. And with all of that would come significant complication and complexity. Let me give you an example that's a bit less abstract. eBay, right? eBay has people who sell things, right? Well, the sellers, and we'll classify those as the first level customers of eBay. But then there are people who buy things, the customers of the sellers, right? And they would be second level. And the patterns of behavior of an eBay seller creating a listing, deciding the price, managing the auction would potentially be very different from the activities of an eBay buyer, where you wander around looking for relevant listings and bidding. So you see that being able to separate these people into groups is going to be important, because we want to understand what category a user belongs to in order to understand what the behavior means, right? Now, there's no right answer to the subclassification. It's a definition, and it's a definition that may leverage the structure of the website. If you're lucky, if it's been designed on a logical basis, the people may have particular directories that they make more use of, right? So there's categories of content, and we may be able to leverage the processes that are provided on the website, like registration, to help classify people. Now, there are these difficulties, but there are huge benefits. At the point that I was able to show the gentleman concerned that he'd got these three groups of customers, I mean, he knew that he got these three groups of customers. He was just looking at analytics and thinking, I don't have a clue what's going on here. At the point that I was able to show these three distinct groups and begin to show him that there were patterns of behavior that these three groups exhibited, and be able to see that, it suddenly started to become clear that he'd got three different audiences, and he could not only understand that there were the three different audiences, but he could understand the behavior of those audiences and use that to improve his marketing. So what we were doing was segregating, right? We were trying to find out which group people belong to. Now, in analytics, in broad terms, how would we go about that? Well, there are three basic ways. There are segments, and that's perhaps the easiest. You don't have to plan a lot to use a segment. You can just start. The segment works with the historical information that has already been gathered. So Google Analytics is a tool for gathering data. And that data has gone into a data warehouse, right? A big storage facility in the cloud. And the reports work on that data. And segments are simply saying, I want part of that information. So even if segments aren't in the end the best way to sort out your reporting, they're a good place to start, because you can refine your thoughts. You can experiment. You can try and formulate a plan as to the best way to get your reporting clear, so that you are reporting things in a fashion that suit your business. Right now, there's a series of useful default segments provided with Google Analytics, like paid traffic and organic and stuff like that. But you can define your own relatively easily, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, that's segments. They have value, but there are other methods. There are filters. Now, filters for segment, that's but one of the uses of filters, but it's a traditional way of separating activity. These, however, do require planning, right? Because they work from the point that they're implemented forward into the future. They can't work historically, right? That said, what you can do is pretty sophisticated. You can make a huge difference to the clarity with which you understand the Google Analytics account by making good use of filters, right? And you can apply groups of filters to particular individual views. So in our example, we might have a view for general users with some appropriate filters, and a different view of the customers, and a different view of the customers, right? All with their appropriate filters, right? Now, this is very flexible and has lots of benefits. But as I say, you have to plan, because you can't go backwards. You can't look at history and say, well, what would that have been like if I had these filters in place? You have to work out what you're going to do, and then you implement it and you see what happens, right? There is now fairly recently introduced a third method. It's called content groups. And it's a good idea in principle, at least. It allows you to collapse a whole series of pages or subdirectories into a content group. If you think about categories in a content management system like WordPress, so this would allow you to see all of the pages in a single category as a group, right? Now, like filters, they only work forward from the implementation date, right? But the challenge is, right, as I see it, that content groups work well when you understand all of the groups. So if you've got all your users and you know how to put all of them into groups, right, and you've got a mechanism for defining that and doing it, great, right? It's not as effective in what I think is a more typical situation, which is you have some people whose behavior is fairly sharply defined, or whose activities are sharply defined. You say that's a coherent group, right? But there will be lots of other people where it's miscellaneous. You've got a whole lot of other pages. You want to see them individually, right? It's a miscellaneous group. Well, unfortunately, content group miscellaneous doesn't tell you a lot, right? So it has some snags, right? Content groups, nice idea, sometimes works, right? Segments. It's up at the top of the screen. I've put a big red arrow. You can use the default segments that are listed there, or you can press the big red button and you can create a new segment, right? And you define the characteristics that cause you to want to put people into that segment. What are filters? Well, filters are in the administrative part, so they're not in the reporting interface. So we wandered over to the administrative part at the top of the screen, right? Home, reporting, customization, administrative part, and we pick up a filter. Now there are some predefined filters, right? Pick up subdirectories, right? But it's in the custom filtering that you can do a lot of good work. And in those circumstances, you can work out exactly who you want to include and who you don't want to include, right? So that's filters. Then we've got content groups. Content groups, again, you set it up in the administrative part, right? But having set it up in the administrative part and defined the rules by a variety of mechanisms, when you come to use them, you're in place that you normally go. You're in site content, all pages, and you go to a new option that's appeared, content grouping. And if you flip it down, you see the names of the content groups that you've defined. And that allows you to see those groups in this report. So it's quite neat, right? If only it worked with the situation that most businesses were in. Right, now I said that filters are pretty powerful. Filters allow you to do a lot of things, right? Well, one of the other things that I'm typically presented with is an account that, you know what, I'd find it hard to find out much useful information in there. I would struggle, and it's because they've got something called page fragmentation. Right, they've got hundreds or even thousands of pages with a small number of visits. Right, so for example, they've got page.php and then a question mark and then some set of gobbledygook like ID equals 1, 2, 3, and each of those has got one visit, right, or a couple of visits. And you can, as I say, you can get hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of pages, right? Filters and custom filters is the way to get around this. You can get rid of an enormous amount of rubbish, right? And I've worked on accounts where I've got rid of 250,000 pages. I got rid of 250,000 pages and brought it down into a few tens, 50 to 100 pages, right? By taking out all of the parameters that the developers use to make the website work, right? They make their website work, but they add very little to the understanding of the marketing and sales process. In fact, they so thoroughly obscure it that nobody can work out what on earth's going on, right? So that is a good use of filters. The other thing that people come with, which is kind of like the first one, but is actually quite popular, is, can you tell me what the impact of the blog is on business? Now, blogs are things that have lots of pages. So each post or each page on the blog potentially gets a separate entry in Google Analytics. But it can be the heart of the content marketing strategy, right? And the idea is the business wants to attract people from all over. They want them to come to the blog, right? But they can't do something of economic significance on the blog. The people who get to the blog, right, have to go somewhere else to deepen the relationship, to do something that has economic consequence, to buy something or to go and make a request to have a chat or whatever it is. And filtering allows you to say, well, instead of thinking about the blog as 100 posts and growing, why do I think about that as one page? And then I can look at the navigation from all of the pages on the website, all of the places across the internet to that page, and say, so having read that page, where do they then go? So it's a somewhat artificial way of representing the pages, because we've invented a page name, but it gives you a really good idea as to the impact of the blog. So if you're in the, well, do I employ somebody to do that? And is the number of articles I've asked for a week, whether that's 1, 2, 5 or whatever, is that helping? This is a great way of proving what the effect is. Because the navigation summary, which ought to have provided the proof, doesn't, right? And as I said, every blog post has got a separate count, right? We want the aggregated view. Now, for impact of blog, read impact of some other part of the website. If you've got a set of tools or whatever, same kind of techniques can help, right? So you want sometimes not to look at the highly granular detail, but to look at an aggregated and accumulated view. Okay. So these are some of the things that I get asked for commonly, that I find myself doing, all part of making analytics understand your business, understand the business that you've got, and deal with the issue that a lot of people face, which is it's got lots of stuff in it, but none of it seems to make any sense. Clarifying it, making it so that Google Analytics actually gives you information that's of use to you as somebody who's trying to run a business and to make sensible improvements. So I've talked about separating people into groups by using segments, by using filters, and if appropriate, the newer content grouping mechanism. But I've also talked about the extent to which I use filters to cleanse the pages that are on the website, to see the impact of a particular part of the website. Now, that's it in terms of the material for this short webinar. If there are things that didn't make sense, feel free to email me later. Right, I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'd welcome some feedback. I'll send you a page, and if you could give me some ideas on how we could improve this, that would be great. If you want to talk further, when you had a chance to think about it, my LinkedIn profile is there. You can make contact. You can ask for a connection. There's my email address, vernon.riley@kksmarts.com. You'll find stuff on the blog at blog.kksmarts.com and the web at www.kksmarts.com. I hope that's been useful. This is Vernon Riley saying thanks for listening. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye for now.